And I also want to say how honored I was, even though when I tell you how I got this gig, it's kind of amusing. But that I'm here for this very auspicious event. NENA has been part of my family's life, and certainly our company's life, and as Robin mentioned, that's okay. All right, am I feeding down? Can you guys hear her? Okay, speak really loud. Forever. And that, and our company was founded in 1915. And I don't think my grandfather joined instantly, but I know that he came quite quickly. And as Robin took away the thunder at the beginning of what I was going to say, is that one of the things that I found very interesting was that my dad was president in 1964. And he was followed by Jimmy Vanderson. I was president in 1999, and I was followed by Bruce Vanderson. So the nature of our association is one of the things that I'm going to talk about. I'm also going to mention the fact that in 1984, and this is going to embarrass my poor son, who I convinced to come with me today, we hosted the NENA meeting down the street. And what we did is there was an area that we wanted to clear to create a container area. And so we took the opportunity of the NENA meeting, and it became a parking lot that day. And I remember the year because Jeffrey was 13 months old, and he attended the meeting in a stroller, and I'm sorry. I'd also like to say a little bit about this absolutely magnificent place that we are. And this is a place that, as Joanne alluded to, is very, very close to our family. And there are many, many, many people in this room that have helped contribute to this absolutely marvelous space. But there's some special things here, and we stood in one of the special places here. But there's something else too that greets you as you come up the driveway. As you come up the driveway to Tower Hill, on the left, there is an absolutely magnificent prestigious sugar maple that actually Joanne has one little branch like that that needs to talk. But that, and this is a tree that my brother, Tim, found in a field in the late 70s. And he planted it in his yard, which at the time was right across the driveway from my yard, which is about a mile down the street at our Boylston farm. And when he died, we decided that that tree needed to go someplace where it could welcome people. So we gave it to Tower Hill. And so that tree, that beautiful prestigious sugar maple there, is planted there, and there's a beautiful plaque at the bottom of it that remembers my brother Tim. We also spent today in the inner park. And after my dad died, any of you that knew my dad knew that a thing was never going to cut it as a memory from my father. He had a great big space. So we came up here and spoke to John Trexler, and John had this wonderful idea about the fact that we would endow the inner park. And this would be a woodland area that highlighted native plants, which were one of my dad's passions, which I could give another whole talk to of the pain and suffering and freezing times that I spent with my dad in the woods looking at native plants. But that was the perfect memorial. So this is a very special place for us. And the other thing that I'd like to say about the people at Tower Hill, if you're in the nursery industry and you have a retail organization anywhere near Tower Hill, you are benefiting on a day-to-day basis. They refer, oh, I saw it at Tower Hill, they said to come to you. We hear that constantly. So this is a botanical garden that truly understands that if you support the industry just absolutely is thrilled to support you. All right, so how did I get this gig? How did I get to stand up here? And Virginia told me I had to talk for 2 hours, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit. Any of you that know me know that I can do that. But Virginia and I were talking about this meeting a couple months ago, and we were talking about the tone. What tone should the speaker have? What should we cover? We needed to recognize the age of the association and that the early companies were predominantly growers. And if we look at the early companies, sure enough, they were predominantly growers because, good Lord, there were garden centers in 1912. Then we needed to recognize that those that were long-time members of NENA were predominantly generational families that had survived. And I'm chattering along, and I'm going, these are companies that survived World War II, they survived economic downturns, they survived when the oil prices went through the roof, and then they rationed them out to you, and I remember my Uncle Clayton screaming and yelling. If you were efficient before, how are you supposed to survive? Because if you were wastrel before, you're going to survive. But they had survived all these things. They had survived regulations. And they had also survived, and I say this nicely, the dysfunctional family member that they had to get past because that person did interrupt their cash flow event. We also had to recognize, and this is very timely, that they had to survive the recession. And those of you that are here did. But it was pretty scary. It was pretty scary. And then we get to the end of this survival discussion, and I said, yeah, but you gotta have somebody up there talking that's still enthusiastic and wants to do this, and that's looking forward. And so then stupid me said, yeah, like I've got a son and a niece coming into the business. We have a young staff. And she said, you're it. So that slowed me down because I didn't want to do this. And, but then we started to dissect it. And I didn't know the gentleman that started our company. He was my grandfather, and I'm old enough to have known my grandfather that started the company in 1915. And I came into the business in 1970, so I have seen a lot of changes. That's a scary number to say that I've been in the company since 1970. I know, I'm holding up. We have survived the generational transitions. My dad bought out his dad. My dad bought out his father in 1950 because they didn't agree on the direction that the company was going to take. I'm sure my father wished that my brothers and I had promoted this particular idea also. We survived the next generational transition kicking and screaming. We came into the company, as I noted, and we argued about what to plant, what equipment we should buy, inventory controls, regulations, the fact that we were all grossly underpaid. And that also, and I say this with great envy, I look at any of you in this room that did business pre-acronym hell, pre-DEP, pre-DOT, pre-EPA, pre-INS, pre-MEPAC, pre. And I just, oh my God, it must have been so much fun. But in any case, my father thought we could still do it that way. So regularly, he either had to go to the Cape fishing, he had to take a really long lunch when the revenuers and the regulators showed up, because otherwise we would have ended up in court over the massive fine. So now, we're talking about generational transition. I shared an office with my dad for 25 years, working on my grandfather's desk. And he fired Brad, Tim, and I about 50 times. We always came back. And now that I have a son sharing that same office on that same desk, which is now his great-grandfather's desk, I think back and I went, oh my God, he did. I don't know how he did it. But in any case, we were really lucky about the second thing that Virginia and I talked about. We got to survive the recession and the dysfunctional family transition at the same time, which also meant that at the same time that we were doing this, I was trying to explain to a new lender, gain credibility with a new lender, that no, I know that the plant sales have gone down, but the labor numbers can't disappear because the plant numbers don't understand if the plant sales go down that we can't take care of them anymore. So, having said all that, we had survived all that, and I'm also very excited about the next generation coming, and the fact that we do have a young staff, that I'm surrounded by, that's excited, that's fighting with my brother and I about what to plant, what to buy, and everything else. So that's why I'm up here. I'm old, we survived, and I'm enthusiastic. So having used the word survived any number of times, why do we do what we do? Why do we stay in a business? And it's funny, the table that I sat at today went through these just as we were sitting there for lunch. Why do we do what we do? We're in a business that the most critical variable that affects our bottom line, we don't control, weather. That has biblical proportion plagues, Halloween snowstorms, Asian longhorn beetle, God forbid that any of you have to do it. Downy mildews, sudden nose death. We are in a business that when I describe our cash flow to our lender, I likened it to bungee jumping. You go off the cliff in the spring, you really hope the rope doesn't break, and you really hope that you are standing on the top of the cliff before your line runs out. And it's a business that requires 60 to 80 hours, regardless of how old you are, of really hard work in the spring, and whose labor force is tenuous at best. And when you go to talk to a politician about it, they don't understand that you are not actively recruiting people that don't speak English. So, why do we do what we do? Well, now you're going to hear a little bit about my life. Like many of you, I grew up not only in the nursery business, but on a nursery. And like a few of you oldies like me here, we grew up in the 50s before parents hovered. My mother only felt a necessity to keep us reasonably clean in bed. We went out the door. My brothers and I went out the door in the morning and we were gone. We were just gone onto the nursery. We hung out with employees dubbed Uncle Norman, Uncle Earl, Uncle Myron, and Uncle Lemony, with a pretty rough demographic that's a little bit different than today. We got rides in World War II surplus vehicles. We actually had a World War II bomb wagon. And we'd head out to the field with the crews for the day. Uncle Earl had one eye and one glass eye. And he would pop it out if you asked him to. And he only had about 4 fingers, and he kind of waggling at you. And he got those chopped off in the factory work that he did in the wintertime. Uncle Myron lived in a shack that was built out by the brook out back. My mother clearly told us to stay away from his shack, which we did. And Uncle Lenny, who always had a pint in his overalls, plowed with the workforce flicka. Now, I didn't think much about this pint in the overalls until I was a lot older, because in fact, I used to ride flicka up and down the roads. When he'd go out plowing the fields, I'd go out with him and ride the horse up and down the road. Well, now that I think about it, it's a good thing the horse knew what she was doing. We had access to a whole world of piles of peat moss we could leap on and all kinds of equipment. My brother Tim, at 3 years old, put a tractor almost over a loam pile, and it was discovered by blue smoke and lots of funny smells. Brad and Tim both put a Jeep in the brook when they were about 10, and they also set this great fire. They set a pretty spectacular fire in one of the old potting sheds. What they decided to do was clean the cobwebs by burning them out of the building. They were young. This was a building filled with tar paper and corrugated pots. It promptly spread to the nursery dump, which happened to be adjacent to it, and while my mom and I watched from the front porch, waiting for the fire trucks, the beautiful towering Serbian spruce that my grandfather had planted around the dump, the flames leapt up them, and it was very dramatic. Like most nurserymen, especially second-generation nurserymen, my dad worked all the time. He worked all the time, and if you wanted to see him, you had to go with him to work. And for any of you that knew my dad, and there's probably a legitimacy to my mom's fears, my mother was positive that he was going to lose or maim one of us at any given time. And when I was reading this text to my son, he goes, yeah, Grandpa wasn't real big on safety. We would spend hours trying to keep up with him in tree rows while we were tagging and pruning and bringing burlap to digging crews. And the smell of burlap still always makes me smile. There was always burlap in the back of the station wagon. My mother would send us kids with him to pick up our traditional Sunday night dinner at the bar down the street. After he had worked all day in the yard, because that was the point where everybody did everything. There wasn't a retail crew and a wholesale crew. Everybody did everything. So my mother would send us down to the bar to get the pizza with a very mistaken belief that he would come right back because we were with him. What actually happened is all of us liked beer when we were really young. Different than anybody else's father, I knew what mine did. My dad grew bushes. And I knew all the people that contributed to that end. I knew the nursery crews, I knew the truck drivers, I knew the mechanics, and I also knew, I think, every single solitary person that we ever bought anything from because they'd come to dinner and probably had stayed over for breakfast. It didn't make any difference what you sold, whether you were a burlap guy or a liner guy or a Tennessee tree guy or a bulb guy, whatever. You ate supper at our house. When I came into the business and when I started attending meetings, any number of years later, I knew everybody. My first NENA meeting was in the late 60s when I was a freshman at BU, when Roger Mezek and I had the same length ponytail. And it was at the Kenmore, and my dorm was right across the street from Commonwealth Ave. My dad came over to get me. We probably went to Anthony's or Jimmy's to eat. And it was from that time that I first knew the same folk that had eaten around the table at my house. When I first came into the business, it was all these same people. They were people that liked to hang out with each other, share success stories and problems, horse-trade plants. Sometimes I think the plants back then went from Northboro to Westport to Rhode Island, and then they came back to Northboro. But the sales were good. And we shared that time together, just like we do today. Though I would say Virginia, there was a whole lot more alcohol. I've attended dozens of meetings. Summer and winter, and the venues have changed, and the world is much faster. And the plants arrive in New England from many, many more places in a lot of different colored pots, I might add. We all meet for the same reasons. We're here to talk to each other and sell plants. And this brings me back to my point. Why do we do what we do? Why do we keep going forward? How do you get young people excited about what we do? Well, in my mind, it's simple. If you just share the excitement of that leap of faith you knowingly or unknowingly make every spring, and then you talk about the people you have the privilege of working with, there is an exhilaration of jumping off that cliff. And I would note here, if you're risk averse or you really want to control stuff, it's a really bad industry. You're going to jump off that cliff with your well thought out business plan, and you're going to make it through the myriad of unknown catastrophes, trials and tribulations that are bound to get thrown at you each year, and you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed when the hoop houses don't collapse in an unexpected snowstorm. You're going to succeed when you hit your sales numbers after 3 jobs got moved to the following year. You've already grown the plant just because some general contractor didn't build the wall. You're going to succeed when you discover a cheap and effective way to kill a pest that's eating your prized evergreen crop. You're going to succeed when you see a crew come in at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, a Mother's Day weekend, to rebuild a house the car crashed through the night before so you still have a good weekend. And you're going to succeed when the crop that wasn't ready 3 weeks ago makes it for the ship date. You're going to succeed when it rains right after the liners get planted. And you're going to succeed when you see a trailer loaded with newly dug caliber trees going off to a job site when 4 years before you could barely afford the liners. You're going to succeed when you see new crews from Burundi or Burma laughing and chatting, potting plants that were living in refugee camps 3 years before. And you're going to succeed when you have the privilege of being there the following season. I was incredibly lucky to be born into this industry. And I'm not even going to pretend it's easy. I was told my whole life it was easy, everybody would want to do it, and then it wouldn't be exhilarating. So I feel very honored to have had the chance to talk to you all today. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Exactly what I think we were hoping that she would say. And we have a gift for you, so please come back up and...
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah. Pretty present. And there's someone else in this room that we need to recognize. There is a member in this room who has, his company business has been a member of NENA for 100 years. And that's Bruce Banasek of Rhode Island Nurseries, and we have a gift for you, please. And I'd like to thank Virginia Wood and her incredible staff for once again providing us a lovely event. It's always a top-notch job, and Kristen and Angela, Virginia, thank you so much for all your work. And I just want to remind the board of directors and the past presidents that we have photos to take in Winter Garden, so please don't run away. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful day, gorgeous weather, beautiful venue. I think everything went off without a hitch. Thanks so much.